So this is our third session of the Semikha program, where so far we're still in the introduction, just talking about the halachic process, and we're looking at the different segments of the what do we call? We could call the Jewish bookshelf. We spoke about the biblical text, the Midrash Halacha, about the we spoke about the Mishnah. We still have to go back and all these concepts that we spoke about of the Mishnah being multi-layered and how rabbi-ovadia edited or did not edit the Mishnah. We'll see them as we go into specific texts. We spoke about the midot she'Torah nidreshet bahem, the tools that the rabbis use to interpret the Torah, and we've analyzed the story of Hillel HaZaken with Bnei Betera when they have this discussion over the Korban Pesach. So that's our last the last thing that we discussed, and I want to go a little bit more in depth into that version in the Talmud, and to see what happened between the Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi, the different versions. So let me share the screen here. 1 second. So we're looking again at Masechet Zahim Daf Samech Vav Amud Aleph. This is the argument between Bnei Betera and Hillel Bavli. They didn't know if Pesach overrides Shabbat or not, and he proved to them that Pesach does override Shabbat. They ask, how do you know that? Amar laim ne'emar mu'ado bepesach ve'ne'emar mu'ado betamid. Ma mu'ado ha'amur betamid duha et HaShabbat, af mu'ado ha'amur bepesach duha et HaShabbat. He said, the Torah says it's appointed time. You should bring the Pesach in its appointed time. The Torah also says that the daily sacrifice should be brought in its appointed time. Just as the daily sacrifice overrides Shabbat, so because and it says it's an appointed time, so also Pesach overrides Shabbat. So here there's a basic question of how do we understand this kind of logic? Does it mean that because the same word appears in two verses, we could merge them and say that all the laws that apply to one would apply to the other? Or if we take it this way, it will be only a linguistic similarity. It says the word mu'ado, which means in its appointed time here, and it says the word mu'ado in its appointed time here. So they are similar, they have the same rules. Or maybe we are going for a deeper meaning. And what Hillel says is the following. Regarding the daily sacrifice, it says that it must be brought in its appointed time. Meaning, the Torah says that when there is a clash between the set time of the sacrifice, which is its appointed time, and between the laws of Shabbat, its appointed time overrides Shabbat. And the same concept should be applied, therefore, to Pesach, that since we must observe the appointed time, if we will wait for Shabbat to be over, we will miss the appointed time, then this halacha would apply to Pesach as well. It might seem a trivial difference, but as we will see later, the understanding of the limud, of the way the halacha is derived from the text, as something which is only linguistic, open the door to an elaborate possibility of drashot, because you only have to do is compare one word to another. So now if you look at the Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi. So in this version, unlike the Babylonian version, when Hillel presents his homilies, his interpretation of the text, they accept it right away and they make him the head of the Sanhedrin. But in the Yerushalmi, the story ends differently. אמרו לו, כבר אמרנו שיש עמך תוחלת, we are not sure that we could learn something from you. So he started, התחיל דורש להן מהיקש ומקל וחומר וגזירה שווה. He uses all these logical arguments, and he says this. Let's compare the two sacrifices logically. הואיל ותמיד קורבן ציבור ופסח קורבן ציבור. Both sacrifices, the daily sacrifice and the Pesach sacrifice, are a public sacrifice. מה תמיד קורבן ציבור דוחה שבת? הפסח קורבן ציבור דוחה שבת. So just as tamid, the daily sacrifice, is a public or a communal sacrifice and it overrides Shabbat, so also Pesach, which is a communal sacrifice, should override Shabbat. They answered, we told you that we cannot trust you. כבר אמרנו אם יש תוחלת בבבלי. מבבלי. היקש שאמרת יש לו תשובה. The analogy that you made between the daily sacrifice and the Pesach sacrifice is not valid. Why? לא אם אמרת בתמיד שכן יש לו קצבה, תאמר בפסח שאין לו קצבה. You cannot compare the Pesach to the Korban Tamid, to the daily sacrifice, because the daily sacrifice is numbered. We bring one in the morning, one in the afternoon. But Pesach depends on the number of Israelites and on the number of families who bring the Korban. So it could be 1 year 10,000, and on the other year 300,000. So their argument is maybe the Torah gave an allowance to bring 2 daily sacrifices each Shabbat, but not to bring an unknown number of sacrifices that could fluctuate between several thousand to several 100,000. That is the first logical argument that he made, and the way it was rejected. The second argument that he made was mikal v'chomer, or as it's called also a fortiori, meaning if a certain law applies in a certain case, it would definitely apply in another more severe case. So what is the severe case? Here's the kal v'chomer. Ma'im tamid she'en mechavim al asiyato karet דוחה את השבת, פסח, שחייבים על עשייתו כרת, ונודיל שידחה את השבת. He says, if one did not bring, if the daily sacrifice was skipped, it was not offered, then there's no punishment for that. But if one did not bring Korban Pesach, he will be punished for that. So if the daily sacrifice, which is not punishable, overrides Shabbat, even more so, that's the a fortiori, even more so, the Pesach sacrifice, which is punishable if you don't do it. They answer, the Bnei Betar answer, Kal v'chomer she'amarta yesh lo tshuva. We could reject this argument. Why? לא אם אמרת בתמיד שהוא קודשי קודשים, תאמר בפסח שהוא קודשים קלים. This, the daily sacrifice, on one hand, is less severe than the Pesach sacrifice because it's not punishable. I mean, not bringing it is not punishable. But the reverse is also true. There is one element in which the daily sacrifice is more severe or of a higher status than Pesach, because one of them is holy of holies, the other one is regular holy. So you cannot make this logical argument. The third argument that he made was Gzera Shava, the one which is brought in the Talmud Bavli, the word Bemoado. And they answer to that, Gzera Shava she'amarta, en adam dan Gzera Shava me'atzmo. So here, you see, there's a stark difference between the text in the Talmud Bavli and the text in the Talmud Yerushalmi. In the Talmud Bavli, the Hillel offers several arguments, and they are excited. They appoint him the head of the Sanhedrin, meaning the power of logic overrides everything. In the Talmud Yerushalmi, he presents 3 arguments. Each one of them is rejected. The 2 first ones are rejected by a counter-argument, which is also based on logic. The third argument is rejected by using a certain law, a certain regulation, which is En adam dan gezerah shava me'atzmo. One cannot learn or analogize two verses based on a word on his own. He cannot do it if he is the one making the gezerah. And that is a very important rule, which we're going to go back to later on. The gezerah shava, let's look at the word gezerah shava and understand what it means. The word gazar in Hebrew literally means to cut. So a decree is sort of something that cuts off or forbids a certain thing. When we speak about the gezerah shava, it means that two things are cut in the same manner. Gezerah shava. So they are equal. Now, the Bnei Betera reject the argument of Hillel, and they say it's very nice that you found a comparison with the word ben mo'ado in its appointed time between Pesach and the daily sacrifice, but since it's your own logical argument, you made it up, we cannot rely on it. En adam dan gezerah shava me'atzmo. One cannot create this analogy based on similar words on his own. And they explain why is that. Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Bon amar b'shem Rabbi Abba bar Mamal, אם בא אדם לדון אחר גזירה שווה מעצמו, עושה את השרץ מטמא באוהל ואת המת מטמא כעדשה. Says if you will use those logical rules on your own accord, without tradition, you will switch the laws of the impurity of a dead body and a dead animal. And he explains how that is possible. And then there are a couple other rules that we're going to go back to later. And here it says, אף על פי שהיה יושב ודורש להם כל היום, לא קיבלו ממנו. Even though Hillel was expounding and explaining the verses all day long, they would not accept his argument. עד שאמר להן, יבוא עליי, he said, I swear, כך שמעתי משמעיה ואבטליון. This is what I've heard from my rabbis Shemaya ואבטליון, כיוון ששמעו ממנו כן, עמדו ומינו אותו הנשיא עליהם. And once they heard that, they appointed him to be their nasi, the Av Bedin. So this discussion is illuminating in the sense that it shows us that the power of the midot Torah nidreshet b'hem, of the logical tools that the rabbi used to establish the halacha is not unlimited. It has to be checked, and there were arguments in the Talmud regarding the validity of such arguments. But we'll go back to it later. What we've seen so far is that there we have this transition from Midrash Halacha to the Mishnah, where the Midrash Halacha, by using some of these logical tools, the midot and the tradition, creates a set of halachot, of laws that are now organized thematically in the Mishnah, but not always in the Mishnah in a logical, necessarily in a thematic manner, because what also has to be kept in place is the order in which the Mishnayot were recited by heart. So let us look for a second. I want to go back to Safaria here and look at some of the Mishnayot. Let's just do a short excursion into the Mishnah. This way we're going to look at the Mishnah. We're not going to start from Masechet Berachot. Obviously the first Mishnah, and I want to show you some of the problems that emerge in the structure of the Mishnah. We did last week. We spoke about, last session, about the structure of the first parak of Kiddushin. So let's look at this Mishnah. Me'matai korin et Shema be'arvit. It's a famous Mishnah. It should be actually be'arvin. From when may one recite the Shema in the evening? B'sha'a she'hakohanim nichnasim le'echol b'trumatan. From the time when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma. So, what does this tell me? This statement. There are two main things that I learned from here. One is that this Mishnah was originally composed at the time of the temple, because the Kohanim would still eat the teruma. The teruma was only practiced at the time of the temple, but the names that are mentioned, Rabbi Eliezer and others, are rabbis of the 2nd century. So this is the case for the oral text that was created at the time of the temple, carried over to the 2nd century when, or in the 3rd century when it was written, and then and the names reflect that later period. The other thing is that the law is not concrete; it's flexible. When we would expect the Mishnah to tell us, "Me'matai korin et Shema be'arvit," when do you start to read Shema? At sunset, or when the first stars show up. Instead, the Mishnah gives us a vague timeline, which is Mishasha Kohanim Nichasim L'chol B'Truma, once the Kohanim start eating the Truma, and that still reflects the what we call the ancient halacha, where things were not set in stone regarding times, quantities, etc. So now the end time for Shema is Atzof Hashmua Rishona Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, until the end of the first shift, the first watch, which could be either 3. That's at least how the Gemara interprets it. It's 3 watches of 4 hours each. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer v'Haim Ovadia, and the scholars, the rabbis, say that it is until midnight. Rabban Gamliel omer ad she'aleh amud hashachar. So we have 3 opinions: until the first watch, the end of the first watch, until midnight, or until the break of dawn. Ma'aseh sheba'u banav bet hamishte, the children of Rabban Gamliel came from the house of drinking. Literally, it means that they were in a party, probably in a wedding party, and they said, we did not read the Shema. He said, Im lo ala amud hashachar chayavin atem likrot. If dawn didn't break yet, you must read. Not only that, but all the halachot that were mentioned as ending with midnight are actually should be carried out until the break of dawn. So here we see a digression from the immediate discussion of the Shema to the general statement of Hachamim of Hatzot. But there is no final decision in the Mishnah of what is the halacha. The Talmud would do it later. So the question is, was the Mishnah concerned with ruling the halacha or not? Later on, there will be rules stated in the Talmud that in the case of a dispute between Hachamim, the scholars, the rabbis, as a majority versus individuals, how do you rule the halacha? But it seems like that even the Mishnah, in some places, wants to leave the halacha somewhat open-ended. We have a similar thing with ambiguous or undefined markers with the beginning of the Shema in the morning. Mishayakir ben tchelet lelavan, Rabbi Eliezer omer ben tchelet lecharti. From when may one recite the Shema in the morning? From when one can distinguish between tchelet and white, purple blue wool and white wool. And according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's when you can distinguish between tchelet and the color of leek. So those are, first of all, very fine distinctions. I mean, not fine, like actually flexible distinctions, and they depend on the person. So it could be, does it mean that there's an absolute time in which people can distinguish between blue and white? Or it's a personal thing, how maybe I can read now, but my friend who has whose vision is not as good cannot read the Shema right now. And we'll see many more examples of that as for the Mishnah describing a more flexible reality. Many disputes, not always finalized. We don't always have the final decision. And here's another example. It's very interesting in terms of tefillah and the way we perceive the tefillah today. This is in chapter 4 of Tractate Berachot. So let's look at this Mishnah. I want to do a little study of Mishnah here. Those 4 Mishnayot speak about the morning prayer. So they say this. There's a concept called Tefilat HaShahar, Shaharit, the morning prayer. It can be said until midday or until 4 hours, and Minha could be said until the evening, etc. Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana, a rabbi by the name of Nehunya ben Akana, would offer a brief prayer when he entered the study hall and when he left. They said to him, "What is the nature of this prayer?" He told them, "Upon my entrance I pray that no mishaps should occur because of me, and upon my departure I offer thanksgiving for my portion." So we start with the statement that you have to pray in the morning. We go on to Mishnah about a rabbi who would say a certain prayer that is not included in the Siddur. And then we continue in Mishnah 3 to say the following. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Bechol Yom Mitpayel Adam 18. Rabban Gamliel says every day a person must pray 18. Rabbi Yoshua says one may say an abbreviated form of the 18. Rabbi Akiva says if his prayer is fluent, he must say 18, and if it's not, he could say the abbreviated 18. So there are 3 options, 3 opinions. Rabban Gamliel says you must pray 18 blessings every day, which is the Shmona Esrei. Rabbi Yoshua says an abbreviated or abridged form. Rabbi Akiva says, I give you an option. If you know it by heart, say the full one. If you don't know it by heart, say the abridged version. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ha'oseh tefilato keva en tefilato tahanunim. Rabbi Eliezer says, one who makes his prayer set, and that in the brackets is extrapolation, not part of the text, as though it is burdensome to him, his prayer does not constitute pleading. So let me ask you for a second, how do you understand the argument between, not the argument, the setup, Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana, who says the short prayer, and Rabbi Eliezer, who says ha'oseh tefilato keva and tefilato tahanunim. What is the relationship between their statements and the statements of the 3 sages in the Mishnah, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Akiva, who say you either say the full blessing, the full 18 blessings, or you say an abridged version, or you say one of them according to your expertise. How do you understand the relationship between the 2 statements about the daily short prayer before entering the Bet HaMidrash, do not pray Tfilat Keva, do not make it a routine, and the middle Mishnah that speaks about the 18 Barachot? Are they related at all, or are they just a collection of laws that have nothing to do with each other? So here's the text again, and Josh is saying that because they're together, it seems like they're related, and Dr. Zeller is suggesting that it is a collection, it's just a compilation of halachot. So it's hard to tell. We don't know. We know that those rabbis, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, are contemporaries, and it seems that Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana was also a contemporary. The only name mentioned in the first Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, is also part of the same group. But now if you look at the whole thing, you say, is it deliberately not edited? We start with speaking about the tefillah of the morning, tefillat HaShahar, then the short prayer of Rabbi Nehunya, then the discussion of Shmona Esrei, and then ha'oseh tefilato keva. Then there's another statement, Rabbi Yoshua Omer, ha'melech b'mkom sakana mitpaleh tefillah ktsara. If you are in a dangerous place, you offer a brief prayer. So one way to see it is, yes.
So another thing I'm thinking about is that it starts, what does seem to be a thread is that it starts with the generic, right? They're starting with the entire service, Shachri, Mincha, Maria. And then they start to drill in, okay, well, what do those contain? So they're working from the more general, certainly it seems more specific.
Yes.
In terms of content.
Right. I hear that. So let's take both options. Let's assume that it is a collection, right? It is a compilation. So if this is the case, then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sits with the rabbis and says, "What is your opinion? What do you have to tell me? What can you tell me about the daily prayer?" And they bring him all this information. However, we would have thought that minimal editing would be done here, and the right order would be like this. The first Mishnah, Tfilat HaShaharat Hatzot, right? Like Josh said, the general prayer of the morning, of the evening, and the night, or of the afternoon and the night. Then should come Mishnah 3. What are those tefillot of the morning and the afternoon and the night? There are 18, or an abridged 18, or an option between the two. Then we would have Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana with his short tefillah, and Rabbi Yoshua with his short tefillah, and then Rabbi Eliezer, who says, don't turn your tefillah into a routine. And then the other halachot, which speak about situation where you cannot pray the regular prayer. So, if it is a collection, then is the way that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sort of throws the Mishnayot into the chapter is in complete disarray. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that what we see here is a reflection of the relatively fluid nature of halacha at the time that the Mishnah was written. We still have a debate regarding the nature and obligation of prayer. And in that sense, we could look at Mishnah 3 of chapter 4 as framed between Mishnah 2 and 4 in order to convey the message that even though there were those rabbis, including Rabban Gamliel of the dynasty of Rabbi Yehuda, the grandfather of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that one should pray 18 blessings. So Rabban Gamliel is in favor of a uniform prayer. And that is in line with the whole method of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel got into several arguments and fights with Rabbi Yoshua over Rabbi Yoshua's sort of independent opinion. And every time that he was rebuked or challenged as to his actions, he would say, you know that I didn't do it for my own glory, but in order to eliminate disputes and mahloket. So he argues that his goal is to have a uniformity within the halakha. And that is on the backdrop of the ancient halakha that we will have to speak about more. But there is evidence that before the time of the Mishnah and the time of the Midrash Halakha, the nature of Jewish law was more flexible. Rabbis or scholars, judges, priests, whoever was the leader in each locality, had the authority to interpret the verses of the Torah. What was tradition, he could not change, but the rest was given to his interpretation. So it could have happened that two Batei Dinim, two courts, contemporary courts in different localities, in different settlements in Israel, would rule differently on the same case, and both of them would be logically sound and anchored in the text, which could happen today also with the American legal system or any legal system. There are always ways to interpret the law. At a certain point, the dispersion of Jews and the maybe the greater mobility, both of them created problems because people were aware of the different opinions and the different customs of each other, and also as population moved and grew, it was difficult to manage halacha with a more flexible or individual ruling. One other example that we are going to look into later is the question of the legal age for the obligation of mitzvot or to be punishable, etc., which originally was done subjectively on a case-by-case basis. The child or the teenager would be tested to see his mental or her mental capacity. Later on, it became a physical checkup to determine maturity, puberty, and later on, for several reasons, the physical examination was forbidden, and they just established 12 and 13. So this is a clear example of the attempt to create a uniform halacha. Instead of saying this child can start putting tefillin at 7, and this child at 9, and this child at 11, they would say everybody starts at 13. It makes, on one hand, it makes more sense. On the other hand, it turns halacha into something more rigid. So here we have this is an example of text that preserves this argument between the innovators, which are actually more rigid because they want to create a uniform halacha for all, and between the traditionalists who say, let us have our own flexible and subjective attitude. So Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabban Gamliel represents the uniform halacha. He says everyone should pray every day 18 brachot. This way we know that wherever you are, we all pray the same. Rabbi Yoshua agrees with him. He says we need a uniform halacha, but 18 brachot, it's too much. We should do an abbreviated version, me'en 18. Rabbi Akiva says we have to still respect the individual and give options. So let us offer two options to people. One is for the more knowledgeable people, you could say the whole tefillah, and if you're not that knowledgeable, if you don't know it, the whole thing by heart, just say the brief prayer. That was framed within the prayers of Rabbi Nehunya and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, as a matter of fact, objects to all three of them. He says, "Ha'oseh tefilato keva and tefilato tahanunim." So, you see in the translation here, which is commentary based on Bartenura, Rabbi Ovadia Bartenura, also the Talmud, they say one who makes his prayer set, and in brackets, as though it is burdensome to him. The word keva does not mean burdensome. It means routine. Keva is routine, a permanent thing. And Rabbi Eliezer says, once you turn the tefillah into a permanent obligation, you lost the spirit of tefillah. It cannot be pleading. It cannot be supplication. So Rabbi Eliezer is not just another opinion. He's someone who challenges the whole concept of the three scholars who preceded him in the Mishnah to say, I disagree with you. I don't think that you should pray either the full Shmoneh Esrei or the abridged Shmoneh Esrei, but rather you should pray when you feel like it and in the language that you feel is necessary. Rabbi Yoshua, who in the previous Mishnah said you pray an abridged version of the Shema of the Amidah, sort of agrees with Rabbi Eliezer, and he says, you're right. Ha'me'alech b'mkom sakana mitpalel tefillah ktsara. That I agree with you that sometimes you have to make exceptions, such as when you are in a dangerous place, your brief prayer would be this: save your people, the remnant of Israel, at every period of transition, let their needs be before you. You are the source of all blessing, God who heeds prayer. Okay. Now, if we go back to Rabbi Nehunya ben Akana, we realize that he is on one page, more or less, with Rabbi Eliezer, and he also objects Mishnah 3, where they said that you have a set version for the tefillah. And here we have to take this into account. There is a tendency among commentators, not only of Jewish text, of any given text, of historical events, of artwork, whatever it is, there is a tendency to see that the text or the object that we're dealing with in light of what we know now. So either we project our reality on that, or we assume that the halakha, and when we talk about halakha, that the normative halakha is the same halakha that existed at the time that this Mishnah was written, but it's not so. So when we look at the Rabbeinu Haim ben Akana and his short tefillah, most commentators assume that this is in addition to the prayers that we say every day. And like I said before, the location of the Mishnah points out that it is impossible, because this should have come after Mishnah 4. Putting it here is saying we don't need to say 18 brachot, but rather, like according to Rabbeinu Haim ben Akana, there you have this option of saying a tefillah that corresponds to your specific needs. And since Rabbeinu Haim ben Akana would pass his day in the Bet HaMidrash, his prayer corresponded to the Bet HaMidrash. The people didn't understand. He says, Ma makom litfilah zot? What is your prayer? He says, when I go in, I pray to succeed in my learning, meaning learning and ruling of halakha. And when I leave, I thank God that everything went well. In a way, he's saying, this is the tefillah, you don't need more than that. So those are two possibilities to explain the Mishnah. We don't know which one of them is correct, but we have, as I said, I'll give you a reading list of Mishnayot, and I would ask you to do as much reading as possible, trying to look at the Mishnah from this point of view before reaching for the commentators, before reaching for, if you need translation, yes, trying to look at the structure of the Mishnah and ask this question of what happens, what is going underneath the surface. If we take it to the later period of halakha, we will find that there is the dispute sort of continues between Maimonides and Nachmanides. Maimonides believes that the prayer is an obligation midoraita, that we are obligated by biblical law to pray. And Nachmanides says there is no such obligation. It's a personal prayer that one takes on his own. They both agree that we follow the rulings of the Chachamim of praying 3 times a day. And our whole discussion here was not la halacha. I'm not saying that you should or should not pray the 3 prayers a day, but rather that we could see in the Mishnah that struggle between the rabbis. So let's pause for a second.
Interesting in studying Mishnayot is that we're always taught that Mishnayot represent the halakha, but clearly we see machlokot among the rabbis, which, kind of in my mind represents different schools of thought. So, for example, Rambam represented one school of thought, the Rif represented another school of thought. So if you have Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, to me, they represent different schools of thought in terms of determining the halakha. So
Correct.
It kind of, lends to the idea of, well, what were they doing in their communities? It must be that each of them in their communities did what they're arguing.
Yes.
So are we arguing more in terms of minhag and what was done in their individual communities? Or is it a situation where we are debating natural halakha, and how does everyone come to a consensus, A or B?
Good. It's a very good question. So a classic example of what you're describing in terms of people following their own tradition can be found in Masechet Shabbat. I'll find it in a second. So in Masechet Shabbat, we find that the Gemara mentions that, Mishnah mentions that במקומו של רבי יוסי הגלילי היו אוכלים בשר בחלב, במקומו של רבי אליעזר היו כורתים עצים לעשות, so לעשות פחמים, לעשות סכין, לעשות ברית. So there was a debate between the rabbis regarding Shabbat. What you're allowed to do on Shabbat? What in terms of things that you could not prepare from before Shabbat. So Rabbi Eliezer holds that if there's a brit milah on Shabbat, since the milah itself, a regular surgery is not allowed on Shabbat, but if you do brit milah, it's okay. He said not only you could do the brit milah, you could actually chop trees and burn them to make coal, to prepare a knife to do the brit milah. All that, I think, and the Mishnah says actually that they used to do that. Bimkomosh Rabbi Eliezer, they would do that, and also that Bimkomosh Rabbi Yosei Glili, in the city of Rabbi Yosei Glili, they would eat off behalav, not chicken necessarily, but they would eat a chicken or fowl with dairy, right? So here's an example, like Nadav says, of a mahloket over the minhag of what is done in my community, but this specific discussion is eventually going to become a uniform law, because the prayer is now, we are in the process. The prayer is an attempt to reinstitute or to substitute the Beit HaMikdash. So this the difference between the two things is what happens in the public realm and in the private realm. But it's not totally private. It's more a locality. So there are certain things that you could do in your locality as you wish, and I will do in my locality as I wish. But there were other things like the tefillah, and the tefillah was extremely important to Rabban Gamliel, where he wanted to establish one rule for all. Even the additional bracha, we speak about 18 brachot, and we know that we have 19. The 19th bracha, which is Birkat Haminim, the curse cast upon the heretics and the deviators, was meant to make the tefillah uniform, because at that time the early Christians would pray with the Jews. There was no way to distinguish between a Christian and a Jew, so this bracha was introduced to drive them out of the synagogue. That's where you create your safe community, or your safe zone. And I think you still see it today in synagogues that there is a tendency to define what is the ideology of the synagogue, who is allowed, who is not allowed. So that is what you see there. Whereas laws such as what do you do when there's a Brit Milah on Shabbat, it doesn't affect the whole community. It's not something that's done on a regular basis. So you do your minhag, I'll do my minhag, until eventually one minhag will supersede the other. Same thing with dairy, with fowl, or poultry. Where are you going to eat it? You're going to eat it at home. So you do what you want to do. I'll do what I want to do. It's not as visible as the laws of tefillah. The same. We'll take another example. This is what happened when there was a debate between the Sadducees and the Pharisees over the setting of the calendar, of whether the question was, do you count the Omer? When you count the Omer, do you count it from the first day after Shabbat, which would be the Sunday, or the first day after Yom Tov, which changes every day, every year? And eventually, the priests in the temple accepted the opinion of the Pharisees, and the other sects broke away from them and went to the Dead Sea, because they felt that they betrayed their tradition. And the reason that they could not continue existing side by side, because that argument over the calendar determined the way they worshipped in the temple, the holidays, and all that. So it's important to know that even though we look at the Mishnah as set halachot, we still see the layers and the arguments that are embedded into the Mishnah. Now, that in turn creates problem when we go to the next level, which is the Talmud, because the Talmud operates from on the working assumption that everything is already edited and finalized, and the Talmud tries to eliminate the area of dispute as much as possible, which is called the dialectics of the Talmud, or the double reading, and that is that when we have two rabbis arguing, one says A, one says B, the Talmud will say, in this case, both of them agree that it's forbidden. In that case, both of them agree that it's permitted. What they argue is about that case in the middle, which we'll see examples of. The Gemara tries to limit as much as possible the area of discussion of disagreement in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, in order to show, as if it were, that there is not that much disagreement. Because when we see the disagreement, we ask ourselves, so who is right? Not only that, we ask ourselves, when did this disagreement start? Is it biblical? Is it rabbinical? Did we forget something? And so those raise a lot of doubt. So the agenda of the Talmud Bavli is to smooth all these problems in the Mishnah and create a more harmonious and acceptable version of the Mishnah. But this not always succeeded, and it creates also its own problems within the Talmud. So those are all things that the posek has to take into consideration. Of course, and we'll talk about it later, that it depends on the question at hand. When you come to the question of practical psak halacha, you want to ask yourself, what is the outcome, or what is the problem that we have at hand? So I give you an example, or several examples of halachic questions. There's a dispute between Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and other Sephardic rabbis and Ashkenazi rabbis whether women recite blessings over mitzvot which depend on time or not. So whether a woman says the blessing or not, for some might not seem like a crucial problem. For others, it would say this defines the role of women within the world of halakha. So funny, I was just off the cuff. I wanted to give you a trivial, sort of what I thought it was trivial example, but actually it's a very serious example, because this one really goes back to the discussion in the Talmud Bavli regarding the exemption of women from mitzvot which depend on time. So let's take another example: the simanim of Rosh Hashanah. Do you have to eat them? Can you just see them? Does it have to be a pomegranate or an apple? It doesn't matter. Those things, if you as a posek will decide to go one way or another, would not make a huge impact on the Jewish world. But when we deal with laws that have serious impact on our life as Jews, and those are mainly the laws of Shabbat, the laws of mikveh, the laws of kashrut, all the laws that for the Orthodox community determine the dress code of women, how they dress, what they're allowed to read, what they're allowed to where they can be seen, what they can do. So all these things, when we run into problems that are based on Talmudic literature, we have to dig deeper in order to try to see if there is a way to read the texts differently, in order to solve the problem that we have right now. So that is why I think it's extremely important for us to understand the structure and the status of each one of the traditional texts that we deal with. One of the questions that we'll have to bring up is each one of that text a fully sealed and contained text that cannot be challenged? And we'll see that this is also disputed. Generally, within the Orthodox world, the understanding is that you don't challenge the Mishnah, you don't challenge the Talmud. But there are certain places where we realize that that the understanding of the text of the Mishnah maybe was not complete because some information was missing, or when we deal with things that depend on scientific knowledge. For example, when the Talmud discusses the length, the gestation period of humans, the Talmud says that it could be either 7 months or 9 months. We know today that it's incorrect. So, do we go back and re-examine and reassess the discussion of the Talmud? The answer is yes. We must do that because there is a different understanding. When we face, for example, a problem of the value of human life, we cannot hold by the traditional understanding that the life of a Jew is worth more than the life of a non-Jew. So if we look at a statement such as, for example, that you save the life of a Jew on Shabbat because you must save the Jew and his life overrides the Shabbat, but if the person who's in danger is a non-Jew, you save him on Shabbat only in order to prevent animosity between you and the non-Jews. We have to understand that this is not something that we could not say, not even think of today. The moment we put a label on the value of a human life, we are on the road to racism. So then we have to answer the question, so where does this halakha stem from? Right? What is the historical background of the halakha? We have to look in the Mishnah, and we also have to look in the Torah to ask ourselves. And maybe I'll leave you with this question this time before we conclude, and as an introduction to the Shana Hadashah. Maybe we all have a good year, Shana Tova. That I want us to think of this question: where in the Torah do we have a reference to such a situation of the possibility of either transgressing a certain concept of the Torah or losing your life? Because if we refuse to help someone on Shabbat, it means that we are willing. Let's take the case of a non-Jew who's in danger on Shabbat. Technically, the Orthodox Jew who believes that you only save the non-Jew to prevent animosity between you and non-Jews would say that if he is in a situation where no non-Jews will know of that case, I mean, there would be no one who would know that he had the opportunity to save the non-Jew and he didn't, then he could really walk away. So we are allowing the death of a person because we're concerned about Shabbat. Where does the Torah suggest something like that? And if it doesn't, then we ask ourselves, where in the Mishnah, where in the Talmud? And if the source is the Talmud, why would the Talmud make such a distinction? So we'll go back to this. We'll get back to this question, God willing, next session, which will be 2 weeks from now. And you could email me. You could about that. I would hear your suggestions. This is the first phase. We're going through the different types of literature, just very briefly and generally. There's still much more to do there, but this is the general introduction to understand that everything should be evaluated and assessed and understood in its context, historically, socially, etc., and of course textually. So we will stop here. I wish you all Shana Tova.